Hello, everyone.
Welcome to the Queers of Time podcast.
I'm Matt.
I'm James.
I'm Kenny.
And I'm Kat.
And this is a podcast to talk about all the gay stuff in the Wheel of Time.
Because we're gay and we like the Wheel of Time. And as always, thank you to Feral Venator of Rain, Lux, Charlie, John, and Robert. Thank you very much for the support.
Thank you. Thanks as always to our patrons or our Patreons. I don't know. Whatever. Thanks, people. Today we are talking about, we're finally getting around to After Sappho, which is the queer book club-ish read that we picked for Pride Month. And it's by Selby Wynn Schwartz, who I think I've heard of before, but maybe not. I don't know.
I hadn't heard of her before, so it was complete discovery for me. I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't expecting that for sure, but I had a good time for me.
Okay, so I don't know why I recognize her name, but none of the books that she's written I've read before. Yeah, I have mixed feelings on the novel. Like I said before recording, I think it's a really good book that I just didn't like that much.
It happens. Not every book is for everyone, and that's kind of okay.
Yeah.
Just to give a brief description of the book, because I'm assuming not everyone will have read it. After Sappho is very much a mix between historical and fictional. It's historical in the sense that it's talking about really people, and I do think it's trying to be true in where those people were at what time and what they were talking about. But it's also fictional in the sense that the author wasn't with those people when things happened, and there's a little bit of it's a novel. There's some fictional aspect, but I think overall it should be pretty true to the people that it's talking about. Hopefully, it seems to be at least a book that is very well sourced.
Yes.
For the writing in itself, it's very much a non-linear timeline, which is confusing because it's a succession of vignettes about a lot of women artists, writers, activists, feminists, sapphists from the late 19th century to the interwar period / early 20th centuries.
Yeah.
It's a lot about how those women connected, their relationship, how they influence one another, and how they fought and yearned for their right to self-determination and to their own bodies, for example.
Yeah.
There's also a lot about how they played with gender rules and norms, how they try to create a space for themselves in a world that is ruled by men. And there's some quotes there that broke my heart because the reflections that they had are still true today. There was one that I really want to talk. Where did I put it? Because I have 4 pages of notes and probably not gonna go through all of the quotes, but some of them are. One was about I think it was Eugenia Rasponi that was talking about that. I don't remember who that was, and I don't think that person was mentioned a lot in the books, but it was about how in 1914 in Italy, we are still jailing the publishers of books describing love. We are still denying to women the rights to their own bodies. It is as if the new century has changed nothing. And you're reading that in 2025, and you're like, yeah, a century later, still the same issue at times.
Yep. It's some places it's not true, but your mileage may vary heavily depending on where you are.
Yep.
So I love Virginia Woolf. So those were my favorite segments. Virginia Stevens, Virginia Woolf's segments. I guess for me, it doesn't happen a lot. But this is one of those books where I'm like, this is a book I would recommend for people, and this is a book that I think is a high quality book that I just don't personally like that much, but I would still recommend to people. For me, it felt like a biography of a bunch of different women fictionalized, but not super fictionalized. Like, it was a fiction writing version of a biography of real women, and like it was hard to like get into I'm reading a novel mode.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely did not read that like I would read in a novel, in a sense that while I was reading it, I mean, I tend to do that sometimes with the books we're reading for the book club, but for this one, it really felt like a book that I needed to write notes at the same time to keep track of some names, some of those relationships, some of the names that I want to learn more about later. Like, there's a lot of writers or actresses that are mentioned. I actually didn't know a lot of those names before, and like, yes, Virginia Woolf, of course. But I don't think a lot of the others I knew, like even Nathalie Barnier, who seems to be like the Shane of the 20th century. And for the reference, I'm talking about Shane from the L Word, who's apparently sleeping with everyone, because that woman had her own whiteboard with a connection between every other sapphists of the early 20th century, honestly.
God, sapphic history is hilarious. Oh my God. And I mean, just queer history in general is funny, but like, some of these women were like just straight up known as virgin snatchers.
Yeah.
And dueled men.
It's so funny. Some of the relationship just made me laugh. Like, I mean, it was a lot of women that were also, like Nathalie Barnier, for example, was not partially attached to monogamy. That was not a thing. Like, if today's shit would be pretty much in the polygamy camp and would be very fine with it.
Yeah.
I don't think she believed in a single couple and this kind of thing. And yes, sometimes there's some quotes that felt so cheeky to me, or there was this moment where, so one of the women that is mentioned a lot about is Lina Politi, who was a poet, translating Sappho a lot, and she was also like fighting a lot for women's rights in Italy. And at some point she had a relationship with another writer who was Sibilla Aleramo. And towards the end of that relationship, she started to get interested in Eleonora Duse, an actress that was a lot older than her. And there's a moment in the book where it's like Lina is sending 2 letters to those 2 women about the same time. And the book is like, in that time, Lina sent Eleonora a poem that began, "Throw open the windows, dive into the sea, come out to the edge of the horizon where the waves melt, where I am waiting for you." In that time, too, Lina sent a letter to Sibilla that read in its entirety, "I may be in Rome soon for a project. Greetings to you also from Santi Muratori, who are married last Thursday in Ravenna. I hope that you are well." And I'm like, boy, that's kind of a letter to send to your ex, I guess.
For real. Yeah. It's like, goes to show that like people really don't change all that much over the years.
People don't change.
We are cheeky now as we were back then. We just say it slightly differently.
Yeah, but there was also some very beautiful story, like love story being told. I really liked, there was a moment between Virginia Woolf and Vita Sackville-West, who, like,
yes,
it's a relationship that, like, mattered a lot to both of them. And there's a quote that is like, "In the end, Vita wrote for Virginia the story of seeing the world change color forever, which is one way to say that you are in love." And I'm like, oh. But also, like, I'm sorry to say, but the soulmate trope where the world is gray until you see your lover and then the world gets color, is that related to that? Because I need to know.
I don't know. Yeah, I loved the Vita Sackville-West appearance because, you know, Orlando.
Yeah. The book ends on Orlando, actually, which I thought was a very nice note. I think like the last chapter especially, there's a bit of mention about the release of The Well of Loneliness, which I don't know if it's the author or also the people that she's talking about, but they had strong feeling about The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall. And then the books end with Virginia Woolf releasing Orlando. And I thought it was a nice thing to end up on.
It was a nice ending note, and I feel it was, I have no complaints with the, like, I just, talking about the book is like hard because like the vignette style isn't my thing, and it like, I guess the reason that the Virginia Woolf section was my favorite is because I knew the most about Virginia Woolf before going into this.
Yeah.
So I feel like I already knew her as a character because, like, you don't go deep into these women's minds or perspectives. So basically, well, yeah, like it feels like a lot of this was like summaries of these women's lives. Like a lot of these vignettes felt like we're not going deep into this character. We're just sort of visiting her life briefly and at different times, but not going too deep. And maybe that's why I felt the disconnect.
Yeah, but I'm not surprised that this disconnect is felt, especially like I understand why she did not go deep in all of those people, because she talked about like at least 20 different women. I tried to count some of them, but it's some of them appears for pages or two, like 3-4 vignettes. Some only shows up for once. So the thing I saw is that since it's very non-linear and some people are going to show up for a few vignettes at the beginning and then going to come back in the middle or in the end of the book, and you don't always know who is going to be important, especially if it's not people that you know. Was Virginia Woolf the only person you also knew, or were there other names that you kind of heard of before?
I definitely heard of some names. Like I know Colette.
Yeah, me too.
Definitely Colette.
But I didn't know she was bi.
I did not either. I learned that. I guess I learned that with this book. But yeah, no, I knew of Colette, Sherry and the End of Sherry. At least that's the book that I know that she wrote. Also Lena Paletti, though I've never read anything of hers. But so Virginia Woolf was the one that I knew the most. I've read To the Lighthouse a lot. I love A Room of One's Own, which I don't know if you've read that, but you would also see a lot of parallels with today. Not in as of a way as this book, but like just generally like how women are not taken seriously. Like the book posits like what if Shakespeare's works were written by his sister, or like what if Shakespeare had been a woman and we never would have gotten Shakespeare's works because, you know, women aren't taken seriously as writers, and who knows how many talented women have their works just unknown or never got written because they were women. So again, like I have a lot of Virginia Woolf experience, which is why I clicked the most with her section, and then Colette, and then a bit of Lena Paletti.
Yeah, I feel like Sarah Bernhardt must have been a name that I heard because she seemed to be a very famous actress from that time. What I do find interesting is that I looked up some of those names later on, and like their queerness, I mean, when you read a wiki page, like the queerness is going to be like a slight mention in the personal life section, and that's pretty much it. And so that's kind of what I liked about this book, is that it brought up a lot of women and highlighting their queerness, their like work as feminists in a way. And yeah, like because the book also talks a bit about what those women were facing at that time. Yeah. There's a few different mention about different country trying to regulate the body of women and what they can do. There's a mention of the Napoleonic Civil Code about illegitimate children, and how like basically you could not make paternity claims because fathers were only fathers through marriage. However, French law, like maternity claims were well within the purview of French law. And I was like, okay, so mothers are mother even without wedding, but even without marriage, but fathers, nah. And that was mostly because like married men did not want women who had dared falling pregnant from them to bother them with illegitimate children. And I'm like, dude, then don't sleep outside of your wedding.
It's like they don't want to have responsibilities. They want to get their dick wet, but not to have the responsibilities.
Yeah. There was a mention about the Zanardelli Code in Italy, who actually failed to mention sapphists and delinquent women, which means that it failed to find us punishable by law in Italy. Moreover, it extended the silence that sheltered sapphics to men who, in the manner of the ancient Greeks, enjoyed the philosophy of reclining with other men, which I thought was a very cute way of describing gay men. And it also mentions the House of Commons, who tried to criminalize female homosexuality and then renounced because they were like, if we talk about that, then women will want to try it, right? So there was a few different mention of like regulation, rights, what they were trying to do against that.
It reminded me of this novel I just read called The New Life, which is, I don't want to say it's like a counterpart to After Sappho. It's about two men. One is he's gay, or he's an invert, which is what they used at the time.
Yeah.
He and another guy writes a book in like the 1890s defending homosexuality. But then Oscar Wilde is put on trial and it puts the book in disarray and everything. But like in England at the time, I just like how the law was just so fucked up, but also just weird. Like it didn't consider women to be like autonomous sexual beings. So like women, it's like, oh, there's like, if you're a woman and you're caught sleeping with another woman, you get a finger shake. But if you're a man and caught sleeping with another man, then it's trial time for you. Which, because like male homosexuality was illegalized, female homosexuality wasn't, but not because they were progressive, but it was because they just didn't think women like were humans capable of making their own choices.
Yeah, it's it does mention invert in the book too. Like an invert is not exactly someone thought backwards. An invert is someone thought in a different order. It's true. Like you could see the distinction between how women were treated and how men were treated, and most part because like women was just dismissed. Women had no purpose except like being in a wedding, being in a marriage, and making children. And outside of that, they did not exist. They did not exist in literature. They did not exist in theaters. They did not exist in broodings. And you can see like that's something that some of those women fought against. I thought there was some really good, like multiple mention, for example, of Virginia Woolf, being very much against anyone who tried to censor the woman's writing.
Yes.
She did a review of a book that was called The Feminine Knot in Fiction.
Yes.
I love that, like, After Sappho just writes The Feminine Knot in Fiction written by a man and never mentions a man's name.
It's brilliant.
And that book was saying, as more and more novels are written by women for women, they increasingly cause the novel as a work of art to disappear. And Virginia Woolf reviewed the book and said, given that women have scarcely been granted a score of minutes to write fiction in the century since Shakespeare flourished, Virginia Stephen demanded, is it not too soon, after all, to criticize a feminine note in anything? And will not the adequate critic of woman be a woman?
Yep, I
loved her.
That was a great that was just a great scene, and or not scene, but like just a great quote in general.
Great quote.
And I'm sure it's real too.
Yeah.
I didn't research like the stuff that they cited, but like definitely
I feel like everything that got cited was sourced.
Yeah, same.
And it's very much like the intimate moment between people, or like the author has a note at the end where she actually comes back to the fact that she almost doesn't mention the men. And it's in big part because she got inspired by Vita Sackville-West, who actually said that the only revenge one could take on certain men was to brazenly rewrite them. So that's what Selby in this book did with After Sappho. There's so many men that are important to those women in a sense that, those are the men that she married, or because a lot of those queer women actually were married to men. And I think the only, generally those men are not mentioned unless those men were pretty cool with their wife being like sapphic. There's a mention of Lina Politti's marriage with a guy that basically generally forgot that they were married unless she needed identity paper for something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was
good. Great for him. Good man.
Yeah, no, that's where I've heard of, because so I listened to a podcast called The Cabinet of Curiosities, and it covers like interesting or strange historical tidbits in like 5-minute segments with like 2 per episode, and one was about Lina Poletti basically marrying a guy who's like, okay, yeah, you just do what you want to, you know.
Yeah.
I know we're doing this just for society.
And also, like, Roman Brooks did the same. She married a man, John, who lived with his lover, Edward, in Capri. Like, it was a gay woman marrying gay men. It's and those are pretty much the major men that are mentioned, except for a few when it's actually to make, like, to shame those men. There's, for example, a mention of a guy called Noel Pepperton Billing, who wanted to catch the wives of men in Parliament entangled in lesbian ecstasy. And the comment is that, not that he could have recognized lesbian ecstasy if he had beat him on the foot. That book is very cheeky. Also, that guy apparently called like someone the high priestess of the cult of the clitoris. And I'm like, I like that title.
Yeah, that's a pretty I think I remember that quote. Like it's a pretty saucy title.
So there was also like one moment in the book they said, in fact, we had learned how to motor by reading the manuals. It was not unlike tribadism or clitorism. If you study the diagrams closely, you could generally manage the maneuvers once en route.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's the kind of moment that made me cheer, because it's like, personally, a lot of those women being queer is not something that we teach in a way. Like, when we teach about literature from that period, like, since we only mostly mention men still today in education, I mean, maybe it has improved since I was a student, but like, it was mostly focused on men. So sapphic women, not really something we would care about, which is disappointing, because so much of that sapphic history apparently happened like in Paris. Basically, Nathalie Barnet had a literary salon where a lot of writers and artists and painters would go and meet and exchange, and a lot of them were like feminists and queer women. And like, it was pretty much the meeting point of the sapphic community, like literary community of Paris. And it was like 3 streets from where I lived when I used to live in Paris, and I had no idea, because this is not an history that we keep or we talk about. And so that's also kind of why I like this book, because it reminded me that there's people who came before me and who are still worth like learning about. Yeah,
that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about the book, is like, it's so important to like know where we came from.
Yeah.
And how, like, one, how bad things were, how bad they could be, and also how people fought power systems like in their own times, and how like they paved the way for us. Which is like, again, why I give the book a good review while saying that it wasn't for me, which is I know it's a weird,
but it makes sense.
It's a weird type of review to give.
I mean, it's perfectly okay to say about something, like to acknowledge about something that it is a good piece of work, a good piece of art, a good book, and still say, but not for me. Like, I've had exactly the same feeling about like the second book of Malazan. Great book, great fantasy book, but I wasn't in the right mindset, so I didn't have a great time. But it doesn't mean me not having a great time about that book doesn't remove anything of that book. And it can be the same thing with After Sappho and your experience. And it's perfectly okay. One thing I did wanted to mention, because our last episode was about Paris is Burning, who was about a lot about the queer community, but a lot about queer men and trans women. And we get to see in this book also a lot of women that, are they trans men we don't really know, but
yeah.
we're like using gender and passing as men. And I don't want to call them trans men mostly because it was also a time where if you wanted a specific amount of right and the ability to do what you do what you wanted to do, you kind of needed to be a man. So how much of them passing as men was just for convenience and how much was about identity, we don't know, and they probably didn't either, because it's probably like it's also something on which society has evolved a lot in the past century, and we are not using the same vocabulary for anything. But I did want to mention some of those people. There was a brief mention of William Seymour, who was actually known as a female cab driver of Liverpool, who was just a woman that was passing as a man to be a cab driver, and then got arrested for something completely different. And then everyone found out she was a woman, which like basically is threw into question what was a woman in a way.
Yeah, that was a good part as well.
So that was a good part. There was a mention to Gerard Duville, who refused to be called Mary. There was Jack aspired to be Jack. At night, Jack would paint the shadow of a mustache, don a jacket and trousers, and escort Elaine to establishments that no young woman could frequent alone. There was Radcliffe Hall, who was using John as a name a lot when going outside. There was Vita Sackville-West, who was passing at Julian. Jack, John, Julian. We talk about trans people and non-binary people today with the same kind of name, and I'm just saying Jack, John, Julian.
It's a nice progression.
One quote that I really, really loved in a different context was something that, like, it was a discussion in a way between Sarah Bernard, who was a French actress, and Eva Palmer, who was an American actress, I think, who moved to Paris with Nathalie Barnet at the beginning of the 20th century. And it was about acting. And she was saying, "You're Greeks, after all," Sarah said, jabbing her finger into Eva's shoulder. "Who do you think they were? They were men, ma chère Eva. Centuries of men filling the stages with themselves, every role at their disposal, wearing gowns or breeches as they pleased. And so now, to be a great actress, you must learn. No more shall we be confined to their cast-off, to their bits of mothers and maidens and ladies in waiting. No, chérie, we do not stoop to consider the sex of our parts." And that was a good quote.
Yeah, that is a good quote. Yeah, back to like the just before I lose my thought, like I hesitate to call any of them trans men, because also like today there are women who wear like mass clothing who do not identify as trans men.
I mean,
so like,
me.
Yeah, it's like, maybe if they lived today, it's like, no, I'm a woman. I just, this is how I like to dress. Or nope, I'm just doing it just so I can get more power cred in society. Or maybe yes, I would rather, or a man is who I really am. But like, yeah, it's like, even today, you can't really assume. So like, I also hesitate to assume like anything about, people who lived like 100 years ago.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Gender is a spectrum in a way, and how we perform gender is very much of a spectrum. But yeah, I just like that this book was talking about that and was showing representation of women that were dressing as men, and it was nice because, like, for example, I think it was Gérard Duville who did not want to be called Mary, at least in After Sappho. When you look at the wiki pages, it's under Mary's name, and it's like, I don't know. Yeah. It's same thing with like Vita Sackville-West. Like, she was using Julian as an identity to like basically to be the husband of her wife or whatever. But when you're looking through her wiki pages, basically the only time where Julian is mentioned is because she also used that name as a character in one of her novels, because that was the identity she was taking. But it's not partially, it's a side note. And like, that sounds like something important to know about someone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely like, it's like, no mistake, like it's definitely very thought-provoking. Like it was a good read because, like I said, like you're thinking about a lot of things that are still issues today, but like how to reframe them in the context of 100 years ago. And like it's nice in a way because like it's sometimes it feels really isolating, especially in today's political climate, like very isolating and like just attacked from all sides. And it's nice to know, or it's nice to read about people who came before you.
Yeah, and to see that in a way, in learning that some of those people were going through things that are different but similar in some aspect to some of what we are going through today, there's a bit of a despair when you figure out that nothing, like something hasn't changed much. But then you do think about all of the things that has changed and how there's still hope for progress in a way. And yeah, it's I like that.
Yeah, it's it's. I'm trying to find a way to put this without making it sound like I'm minimizing fears. Like today's political climate is very scary. Like that's not a thing that's like really negotiable. It's just very scary, and I'm not downplaying that. But it's interesting to think, even with all that and the setbacks that we've had the last several years, we still have like countries around the world permit same-sex marriage. There are thankfully countries out there that have no issues with providing gender-affirming care. You know, there are states within the U.S., like even with the shit show that is the U.S., like we still have protections for trans kids, for trans adults in some states, like Minnesota, where I live. Like I would say that where I live is like a good representation of a progressive place where things generally are better despite the setbacks that we're currently facing. So it's like it gives me hope that even if things are really shitty right now, they can get better, because things were really shitty for them back then. And yeah, there was a lot of struggle and shit that no one should have to deal with, but things still got better. It's just,
Yeah. In a bit like in a different note, the book also mentioned like the book is basically set right before the First World War and in between of the First and the Second War. So we do associate the reaction of those people to the First War and to the rise of fascism. I think I don't remember who was talking about that, but there was like on the reaction to the war, there was might we ask them to behave like rational person for once, because they were all women and like they could not decide whether to go to war, and it was very much women like having to deal with men's mess. There was some one moment that kind of touched me was a mention of Romaine Brooks and I think Ida Rubinstein being ambulance driver during the First War.
Yes.
Then basically stopping after seeing the effect of chlorine gas and just being deeply affected by what they saw and how it affected their work later on. There was also a lot about Lina Politi, because Lina Politi was talking a lot about fascism. And one quote that touched me a lot, because it's about immigration in a way, was she was doing some research about Crete and basically some historical knowledge about this island. And she basically concluded that Crete is as much an inland of Asia and inland of Africa as it is an inland of Europe. And if we do not see that, we shall be no better than the fascists.
Well, there you have it.
And I'm like, yes. And it's still true today when we talk about immigration. And also like when we reach towards the end of the book and you see the rise of the fascism in Italy, it's like we don't get up to the Second World War, but the rise of the fascism in Italy between like around the 2030s is mentioned a lot. And at some point, Lina Politi kind of disappeared from the book because it was also a time where she could not write, I think.
Yeah.
And after her disappearance, after the end of the book, there's kind of a note at the end. And that note is about how every time the fascists came, Lina wrote a manifesto. There is always some candle that will not be extinguished. And I like that was the note to end on. how there's always people that will keep fighting against fascism.
Yeah, it makes you feel less, it made me feel less isolated in the blech of it all.
Yep.
Which is good.
Also, I'm just reading some of the notes that I have, and like, there's an asshole who dared to say to Lena, like, "My dear, you are only 26, he said. Content yourself with small drams of inspiration. Do not expect greatness to come upon you." Fuck that dude. Forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, my talking points were all basically just vague, like reviewing the book itself, but like you're pulling the good quotes.
I think so. I have one thing left because this book is called After Sappho, and we actually did not talk about Sappho at all.
Yeah, we didn't.
Because so the way the book is written, there's basically a collective we that kind of reminds the chorus of antique Greek. And there's a lot of comments of various fragments on Sappho. And I think to finish, there's one moment that I would like to read. One fragment that I think summarizes pretty much this book in itself. And it's about the fragment 154 of Sappho. Are you fine with me reading that?
Yeah.
Those were the stories we were given. When we were children, we learned what happened to girls in fables. Eaten, married, lost. Then came our bout of classical education, imparting to us the fates of women in ancient literature. Betrayed, raped, cast out, driven mad in tongueless grief. It was not unusual, we discovered, for women to be dragged across the seas as slaved and then murdered on the threshold. Cassandra was merely one of many. Was it any wonder that we read Sappho instead? The worst of Sappho's heartbreaks are bitter dawning of envy, the keen emptiness in her arms, where a beloved no longer sleeps, an exile from one beautiful Iceland to another. Sappho has the luxury of growing old in her own bed. Her hair grows white on the pillow. Her acolytes listen to her cracked voice, thinking the memories of those wild silver nights. Full appeared the moon, and when they around the altar took their places. Sappho had many years of long afternoons and celestial nights. Nothing happened to Sappho except her own life. I think that's my favorite fragment, the comment on the fragment. And that was After Sappho.
Yeah, the book itself is very poetic.
Yeah.
Like the writing itself is poetic.
It made me want to look up a lot of those women and read some of their work.
Same. It made me want to read, I forgot. It made me want to read some of Lena Paletti's stuff. And I also wanted me to read Colette's, or made me want to read some of Colette's stuff, which there are translations in English by the New York Review of Books. So I might snatch some of those up. Good Lord.
Yeah. We did not mention Anna Kulisev, a politician who spent her whole life fighting for the right of Italian women. And when she died, it was during the rise of fascist in Italy. So a funeral were disturbed by fascists. And I'm like, fuck those people.
Yeah, fuck those fucking fuckers.
Anyway, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I'm good.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of The Queers of Time. I hope you had a nice time. If you haven't read After Sappho, as we said, it's a complicated read. It's not like a typical novel, but it's very interesting. So I really recommend trying it out. As always, you can find us on most social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, on Tumblr, Instagram, TikTok. We also have a Discord that you can join. There's always a lot of fun discussion about books, about movies, about whatever's going on in the world. And if you want to support us, we also have a Patreon on which you can get unedited video recording and episode in advance. And that's about it. Thank you very much for listening, and bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. This was Queers of Time, a Wheel of Time podcast. The music is Dance of the Witches by Julius H.